Welcome, everyone. We'll be getting started in just the next few minutes as we are coming in, and we're going to go live on Facebook. So we encourage you to share this event on Facebook by going to the DVU's Facebook page. And you will see when we are going live. Thanks, everybody. We do have interpretation available in both Spanish and Korean. Great. Welcome to everyone on our Facebook page. We are going to get started very soon. There we go. We're going to share. Hold on, let me turn off my own sound, and I will share on my page and we will get started. Okay, thanks. Thanks for everybody who's joining us. My name is Judy Mark. I am the president of Disability Voices United, which is an organization that advocates for choice and control over our lives. And we are the people who've been bringing you SDP Connects for about a year and a half now, and we are really thrilled that you're here. Most of you, I recognize your names, but I know I see some new people coming in, so that's really exciting that you're here. Just want to let you know that we have interpretation available in both English and in Korean. Not in English, in Spanish and Korean. Those of you who are coming in who are speaking Spanish or Korean know this, but for those of you who are speaking English, you need to pick your own language. You need to pick English as well. So you go down to interpretation at the bottom of your screen and choose English. The reason why you have to do that is because we will have, if we have questions in Spanish, you will need to, oh, I'm hearing some feedback. So I want to make sure everybody's muting themselves. Okay, great. So you will need to have your channel in English. Okay, so let's get started. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Today, our topic is looking at the self-determination transition funding that is available to people who are moving in for the first time into the self-determination program. And that we've talked a bit about that funding in the past. And you can go to our self-determination interchange, which you'll see in the chat, a way to get to that link. But if you go to our self-determination interchange and look up the session that is called Role of the IF, or the Independent Facilitator, in that session, you'll see us talking a lot about this as well. But there are some new issues that are coming up that we're going to bring up today that I wanted to hear your opinion about. You know, at DVU, we spend a lot of our time listening to the community and listening to your concerns and try to bring your concerns and the information that you give us to the state level and to the Department of Developmental Services, or DDS, who are in charge of implementing the self-determination program. So thank you all for joining us. And I have a little slideshow here. At the end of the slideshow, we will take your questions and ask you to answer some questions that I'm posing to you in this presentation. You will be able to give comments in one of two ways. You can do it by putting your information in the chat, and then we will go through those questions or those comments. Ed will do that at the end, after the presentation. You can also use the raise hand feature by going down to reactions, clicking on raise hand like I just did for myself, and then we will call on you and allow you to unmute yourself. You are all muted at this time so that we have clear audio for our interpreters. Okay, so let me share my screen. All right. So as I said, this presentation is about the self-determination transition funding. Where did it go? That's weird. That was weird. It went to black. But there we go. Is it back, Molly? I'm looking at you. Okay, you can see it. All right. So the Department of Developmental Services has allocated transition funding for individuals with who want to participate in the self-determination program. This funding has very specific ways you can use it, but it's really critical funding. The way you can get this funding is by completing the orientation of the self-determination program. This is an orientation that your regional center is offering to you. You can get to that orientation by asking your service coordinator. And each client has up to $2,500 in transition funds. And that $2,500 can be spent in only very specific ways. And we're going to talk about that today. I'm going to try to get the chat up here just in case anybody's trying to reach me in an urgent way. Okay. All right. So you can use this funding to assist you with your person-centered planning and to create your person-centered plan. It can assist you with creating your spending plan. This is, if you don't know what these things are, please go back and look at our previous SDP Connects because all of it will be in there. And they can assist you in finding services and supports and service providers that you will fund through your self-determination program spending plan. And you can also, the other key thing that you can spend the money on is bringing somebody with you to advocate for you during your IPP or your individual program plan meeting with your regional center to advocate for you for your individual budget amount or for your spending plan. So these are the things you can use. So we've talked about this a lot in detail in the past. So that's why I'm kind of going over this quickly. You want to make sure that you're using your funding in an effective way. I'm going to ask Molly to do this particular slide, please. Oh, you are muted, Molly.
You have $2,500, which can seem like a good amount, but when you start thinking about how much there is to do creating new services, you have to be wise about how you're going to allocate it or budget it. So the best way is to make sure that you hire people you trust, who will assist you, who will help you in the area that you would help with. Does it have to be every area? It could be your PCP, your individual budget, whatever you want, or it could be a lot of different things. They must have trained, in person-centered planning and self-determination. So if they're IF but if it's someone like and they know you well and you want them to be your person-centered planner, they do have to get trained. So,
oops, sorry.
Yeah, there are websites where you can find people who are trained as independent facilitators or person-centered planners, and you can look there to hire someone.
Yeah. Okay. Hold on. Sorry. There it goes. So as Molly was saying, there's this $2,500. DDS, which is the state agency that funds the regional centers that have contracts with the regional centers. DDS calls them pre-transition supports. That's what they're calling them right now. And the way they're seeing it right now is that there is guidance that they put out about this. And we went into incredible detail on this guidance for regional centers on that same previous SDP Connect, I'll call on the role of the IF. So it's really important for you to go back and look at that if you feel that the regional center is not if your regional center is not allowing you to spend this money in a way that you think you should be able to do it. So it's important to read that guidance. The DDS has said that you can have, that it can be provided by your family, your friends, professional independent facilitators or planners. You can also use funding to work with an FMS. So this is something that people may not know, is that you can take some of this funding and you can hire an FMS that you trust to help you figure out your spending plan. Sometimes right now, FMSs don't have a lot of time. And so there's a way that you can ask them to do this by giving them some of that $2,500 to help you with your spending plan. They are not going to be helping you identify services and supports. You should know that. But what they will do is help you design your spending plan in a way so that it helps you at your IPP. The other thing is that there's additional funding available to help you transition into the self-determination program besides this $2,500. Your local advisory committees at each regional center have an amount of money to spend however they see fit. And one of the things that most regional center advisory committees are doing is they're hiring coaches to help people move in. They're not going to be the ones who lead your person-centered planning, but they are going to be the people who help you kind of figure things out so that you can hire a person-centered planner, you can identify a good FMS. They're there to really be your coach, and they're going to work one-on-one with you. And sometimes there are multiple organizations that are providing this kinds of coaching. So I really encourage you to go to your local advisory committees meeting and ask them if they're offering these kinds of services, because that is on top of the $2,500. You can also use your service coordinator, who is there, who you can use for free. They cannot get paid any of that $2,500. And in many cases, people have very good relationships with their regional center service coordinators and want them to be part of the development of their person-centered planning. You just have to remember that your service coordinator is also going to be the one who is part of the IPP team that decides on the individual budget. So they're probably not the right person to advocate for you at the IPP, because they're there to represent the regional center and not necessarily you. So you have to figure out a way to work with your service coordinator that serves you best. Each regional center is also going to be hiring at least one and probably up to 3 participant choice specialists. These are more senior level individuals who will be working on the self-determination program at each regional center. They will be training service coordinators, and they will also be working individually with participants as needed. So they're supposed to be the expert on the self-determination program at each regional center. I'm not sure that all the regional centers have actually hired that individual yet, or these people yet. So you can ask if they exist yet at your regional center, but they may not, because the direction about who they are and what their role should be just came out a month ago. So regional centers are just getting up to speed on it. Do you want to do this slide, Molly? I muted you again, so go ahead and unmute. Oh, you're still muted. Sorry.
We have heard stories like someone had hired a person to do their person-centered plan, and they gave them the 2,500 all due to the person's in a plan, and the plan wasn't completed, it wasn't done, but the person said, well, your money's gone, I can't, you have no more money, you spent it all, here's what you get. So we want to make sure you hire the right individual. And we think some tips would be that, first of all, these people see you and your family as the lead in developing your self-determination services. You guys are the experts because it's your life. So, you know, people might come in and say, well, I know everything and I know, but you're like, but you don't know me and you don't know what my needs are. You are the expert. They need to understand who you are, and especially when it comes to whoever, like if you hire an Aya, but they didn't do your Pretransition plan, so you need to let them know what goal came out of your PCP and the goals that are going to go into that IPP, and why these goals are important to you, because they're going to help, well, they do drive your spending plan. So they really need to understand why these goals are your goals and what you want to achieve. They should know your community. If you're in the Hispanic community, what's out there service-wise, support-wise? How do you feel comfortable interacting? That kind of stuff. And the key thing is they need to listen to you. You are the one hiring them. This is you. You know, they are going to tell you what to do. You're going to tell them what you want them to do. And so just be sure you're hiring the right person. Because if you don't, it could create a lot of barriers that don't need to be there in the first place.
Sorry that I keep going fast forward. I'm letting people in sometimes and then I click the wrong thing. Okay, thank you, Molly. And you actually said this, you actually talked about this, that you need to be careful. Some people are charging $100 to $150 an hour. And so you need to make sure that that $2,500 is going to get you what you need, you know, in order to prepare you to transition. Some individuals have been able to get additional monies after the $2,500 is spent, but that is an exception and you don't want to count on that. So if you are going to need about 40 hours of work on this, that's about $62 an hour. So just remember that, okay? All right, so here's sort of the main thing that we wanted to talk about with you today. So DDS is exploring new ways to provide this transition support. And I am concerned that, oh, Susan's asking, what do we put the description in for the $2,500? You don't have to put the $2,500 in the spending plan. That is funding that you get in the traditional system before you go into the self-determination program. So that money is already spent. And if you want to continue to use an independent facilitator, that you can figure out specifically how much you need for your ongoing support in the self-determination program. So DDS is looking for very specific feedback on these transition services. And I felt it was really important to bring to you in our discussions here at SDP Connect. So this language is directly from a presentation that DDS gave at the statewide self-determination advisory committee meeting on the 10th of November. So I don't want anyone to think that this is I'm putting words into Nancy's or anybody's mouth. This is directly from their presentation. It was provided by the director of DDS, Nancy Bargeman. So one of the things that they're looking at is defining and establishing guidance for person-centered planning services. So what are they may become much more specific on the qualifications and certifications that person-centered planners need to have. And so, we want to make sure that people still have access to person-centered planners or facilitators who know their community, who know their language, who know the kinds of needs that they have. And so we are really advocating to make sure that it is broadly stated what the qualifications are. The second thing is that how the language was put in here is that the service coordinator, participant choice specialist can help to support. So, I told you earlier that is definitely an option for those of you who have a good relationship with your regional center. I do remain concerned that people may be talked into using their regional center service coordinator in being their transition specialist, and that service coordinator, it may not be in the interest of the regional center for you to get all the services and budget that you need to really support you and that really meet your needs. And so, that means that you have that option to hire someone else to support your transition into the self-determination program. I have told folks that is certainly what we did when my son transitioned into the self-determination program. Even though I am an expert on the self-determination program, I still hired an outside person to help us with the transition. I actually got an email from someone recently saying, I'm going to be my adult son's independent facilitator. I know what his needs are. And I would tell you I think I know a lot of what my son's needs are, but we still discovered things that were out of the person-centered planning process because someone else was leading it. So it does look, Ed said that the closed captioning has stopped for some bizarre reason, and she is trying to troubleshoot it, so we apologize. The other piece that is really critical is that the transition funds receive federal reimbursement. So what does that mean? What does that mean? I'm going to try to explain it in as plain language as possible so that all of you understand the implications of what I am saying. So currently, under the current guidance, anyone that you select to be your person-centered planner can be your planner, and they do not have to be what's called a vendor of the regional center. A vendor of a regional center is a person or a company or an organization that has a contract with the regional center. And right now, the independent facilitators do not have to be a vendor. We have found this, at least I have found this, to be a very good thing, so that we're able to choose people that we know us, that know our community, and that will listen to us and will be truly person-centered. If the transition services are going to be eligible for federal matching funds, then it appears that all person-centered planners would be required to be vendors at every regional center in which they serve clients. And I'm not sure exactly what that will entail, but I can tell you this, that we here at little old DVU, Disability Voices United, are a vendor of the regional centers. And the only reason we're a vendor is because we put on a big self-determination conference every year that many of you go to. And the process for us to become a vendor of the regional centers, I can tell you honestly, has been a nightmare. It is, we have to have special liability insurance for a number of the regional centers, which is very expensive. One regional center is asking us to get an additional coverage for sexual molestation, even though our conference was online. And that would have cost us $1,000, and we weren't even going to have that many people from the regional center. So this is how complicated it is to become a vendor of a regional center, and can be quite expensive for person-centered planners to get that liability insurance. So I remain concerned. And by the way, the billing system will become very complicated, because when you're a vendor, you have to use the e-billing system of the regional centers, which are very complicated. And so I fear that some people will drop out. The pre-enrollment access to the FMSs and independent facilitators I think are important. And I think that they're looking for feedback around making sure that FMSs are getting additional funds, because they're spending so much time transitioning people into the self-determination program. It's also, that you should understand that no one should be paying out of pocket for these services. DDS is also, by the way, talking about they're using a term called unbundling these services. And I know that's probably not even a term that our interpreters can figure out how to say unbundling. Bundling means that you have all $2,500. People are thinking you need to use it for one independent facilitator. But what they're wanting to encourage people to do is to say, here is the amount of money you can spend on the person-centered planning process in the meeting and to get the plan written. Then here's a second amount that you could use to develop your spending plan. And you can split that monies between your FMS and a facilitator to help you do your spending plan. And that you might want to even have another amount of money to advocate for you at the IPP. Some people are actually unbundling it on their own. They're separating out the money already. But this is something that DDS is really looking into. The other thing that you should know is that the state budget that passed in June included additional monies for some people to get what's called enhanced transition supports. Enhanced transition supports are on top of the $2,500. And they are looking for guidance on who are the kinds of people who should be able to get that additional money on top of the $2,500. They have asked some people already what people think. And some of the things that people have said is they want to make sure that it is easy for individuals and families to get these transition supports, that it's not bureaucratic, and that everybody's needs are different, and we have to acknowledge that we allow choice for transition supports that make sense, so that we want to have a lot of options for people. And that we meet the language and cultural needs. It's really important to understand that there are people who speak languages in the state who, if they don't find an independent facilitator to help them who speak their language, then they can't go into the self-determination program. And that it's flexible. It allows for flexibility, and that we provide individual training for families who need extra time to move in. So here are the questions that DDS, that Nancy Bargeman specifically asked the statewide self-determination advisory committee at their meeting. And I'm really interested in hearing from you what you think, because we will then capture your feedback and get it to DDS. So what recommendations do you all have for these changes in transition supports and this new money for enhanced transition services? What are the supports that people should be getting? Who do you think should be eligible and would benefit from these enhanced transition supports? And are there any specific qualifications or skills individuals should have to successfully provide these services? So I'm going to actually try to capture these questions and put them in the chat because for me to get answers from you would require me to stop sharing the screen because I want to be able to see you. I'm going to let Ed get it all in the chat right now before we move forward so that you all can see it. And I want you to think about your answers. So I'm going to take one question at a time. So, all right, perfect. Thank you, Ed, so much. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing the screen so I can see everybody. And once again, you can either put your comments in the chat or you can use the raise hand feature by going down to reactions, clicking on raise hand, and I will ask you to unmute yourself. So right now I don't see any hands raised, but I've seen a lot of things going on in the chat. So I'm wondering if I can ask Ed to kind of go through and see what people have said so far.
Sure thing, Judy. There's quite a bit happening in the chat. I have a question that I'm not sure was answered earlier. Betty asks, is the agency that helps with the PCP, the person-centered plan, also considered an independent facilitator?
Yeah, that's a great question and a little bit confusing, and I understand why you asked that question. So the independent facilitator actually has a very specific role once a person moves into the self-determination program. And the funding for the independent facilitator must come from your budget. They must be written in your spending plan. So DDS needed to call this individual something different who are helping people transition into the self-determination program. So they called them transition specialists or person-centered planners, which is why we kind of interchangeably use the term independent facilitator or person-centered planner. They are mostly the same people. I can tell you, knowing a lot of independent facilitators out there, they are mostly the same people. And so the difference is, though, that the $2,500 that you get to transition people into the self-determination program is not receiving federal funding. And that is something that DDS and the state of California does not like, because for every dollar that we spend from state monies, we get 50 cents at least matched from the federal government. So if we end up spending, $1 million or $2 million in transition funds, we're missing out on potentially $1 million in federal funding. So you could imagine this is important. But to get that federal funding, we have to have a service code, like in the traditional system, and vendorship. And so what we're advocating for is that maybe we could find some sort of vendorship light or something that doesn't require person-centered planners and transition folks to jump through all the same hoops and get on liability insurance and do all those kinds of things, which I think would put a lot of person-centered planners and IFs out of business. I'm very concerned about this. So I wanted to hear from you. So I see, Lourdes, you have your hand up. I'm going to ask you to unmute so that you can tell us what you wanted to say.
So my situation will be, some regional centers are saying that they'll take families to their hearings over a $3 dispute on budget. That literally has been said in public forums. So if you serve those communities, usually community of colors, the actual people that are within the focus of the disparity grants, how is the independent facilitator who's working with those communities will be able to break free and actually do something that they will stay in business? Because first of all, going to a fair hearing is a 4 or 5 day process just in the actual process, but the preparation, helping the parents, gathering the information, all of that, when you break it down into $2,500, that's to transition that family to get them their unmet needs to be acknowledged by a judge, not by regional center, but actually taking this matter into the desk of a judge. Any independent facilitator doing that is not breaking even.
Yeah.
There is no profit in there. And it's heartbreaking that you will see that there's distinctively people of color who are going through that process. And we have to break barriers. We have to do a lot of uplifting, empowering the parents, on top of getting them into self-determination and teaching them what to expect about the legal system in the United States. How is that going to be put in? Because we're not going to change disparities. We're not going to move the needle. We're not going to come to the table because self-determination will be very taxing, very emotional process for those families.
Thank you. That's really helpful, Lourdes. And just as a heads up to everybody, we Disability Voices United, Disability Rights California, the Integrated Community Collaborative, and Stanford Law School are coming together to have issued a report to have substantial changes to the fair hearing process. And we will be having a community-wide meeting about that in January. And we promise you, we're actually starting to brief legislative staff and DDS next week on our recommendations. So we're hoping we're going to resolve that issue in a different way outside of the self-determination program. Jan, you wanted to make a comment.
Well, I would say when you're asking for people who might need additional, I would say I've had some assessments that have been ridiculously long and difficult for families, or multiple assessments that I've had to assist the family in, like, how do I do this? I've had to go to extra IPP meetings, like quarterlies for some people, for some adults, because it's been complicated and the family wants me there to make sure that they get it right. I've had, especially this one's been difficult too. It's the language barrier, you know, a Mandarin speaking client that speaks really great English, but it's still really difficult. I think it's taken longer because we had to take a while to get each other, you know, that cultural thing, you know. And so I have family in China, so I was kind of like reaching out to, you know, like, am I not understanding this? And I think it takes more time. You need to take that extra time to really see what they're saying when you don't speak the same language. Mm-hmm. And I say that's been it. So assessments that take really a long time and they need extras, and the language barrier, and we don't have enough of obviously speaking Mandarin speaking IFs out there. And I think some people too who've been burned by a fair hearing, and so they're really reticent, and I have to explain things quite a bit extra to them. And then the extra IPP meetings that are really not just self-determination related. They're just, I mean, you know what I mean? It's kind of both. Mm-hmm. So I've gone way over and never asked for more because I don't even know where to go on that one, but I want to make sure they get in. So I've hung in there with them.
That's very helpful. Thank you, Jan. Sunny.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm following the chat, and what I'm realizing from the chat, and this shouldn't be surprising, is that an argument could be made that any of the communities served by the regional center, children, adults, fewer needs, smaller budgets, bigger budgets, you could make an argument that any of those groups or all people would benefit from an enhanced transition funding. So I can see the challenge here in making this decision. in my experience, the one that comes first to my mind is people who use AAC or have, complex communication. If the entire thing is going to be based on person-centered planning and that person's voice is expressed one letter at a time, it takes more time. So that one we've had that, and we've been able to get additional funding for people who use alternative modes of communication for that reason. Self-advocates, people who are doing this on their own, and it takes more time to like put together that circle of support and walk them through, make sure they're making choices for themselves and informed choices. And then of course the communities that have documented disparity in terms of their existing regional center services, because as Jan said, when you identify unmet needs, then there's like assessments and all these things that come up to try to reduce that disparity, and those things take time. So I think that kind of goes along with what Jan was saying, is that when we know people come from communities where they have not been having their needs met so far, there's going to be more time to take there in their transition. And then I agree, Vivian put in the chat, people who live in group homes, and that kind of going along with the self-advocates for the same reasons, that would be another group that requires, I think, additional support.
Yeah.
Okay.
And people, not just group homes, I would add to that list, people who are in more institutional settings.
Yes.
So maybe somebody's in college hospital and they want to transition out. Those are folks who are going to really require additional support. So that's very helpful. Can I ask you, Sunny, put you on the spot about this federal funding issue? And just to recap for everybody, services and supports that people get through your spending plan are matched by federal funding. So for every dollar that we spend from the state of California, at least 50 cents, and sometimes up to even a dollar for dollar, is matched by the federal government. Depending on which waiver you're on, it becomes very complicated. But if you're a foster child, you're getting a higher rate. And there's all these other kinds of things. But generally, at least 50 cents on the dollar. And right now, since the transition services are not a regular service code, remember it's under service code 024, which is called parent reimbursement. It really has nothing to do with person-centered planning. So DDS is talking about creating a new service code that would be for these transition services. And then anybody providing those services would need to be vendored with regional centers. And so I'm wondering, I know that you're a more skilled person, but there's a lot of people providing this service who may only have one client because maybe they were the person's special ed teacher and knows that person really well. So what do you think of that issue?
I'm honestly, I'm kind of two minds about it, Judy, because philosophically, I really believe in the intention that anybody should be able to be an IF, and you should be able to hire your pastor or your special ed teacher or your whoever to be your IF or your cousin or philosophically, I really believe that, and I want this system to move in that direction. In practice, right now, that scares me a little bit because I see how complicated it is to help people transition. And I see how much math and accounting is involved in understanding the budget, catching mistakes in the budget. I see how much knowledge is required of the traditional system to make sure that the regional center isn't presenting biased or limited information in their favor to keep budgets small or to withhold services from someone that they should be entitled to. So with the amount of skill and knowledge that I'm seeing at this point in time with the transition services, I'm kind of feeling like that that having some level of protection to make sure that people are getting quality support might be a good thing. But I'm hesitant to say that because I think it goes against philosophically what I believe the intention of the program is and how the program would best function. But I think there's so many things like on the regional center side and in the mechanics of the program that need to be fixed in order for anybody to be an IF, which is really what we want. So I don't know. That's
Yeah. So I get what you're saying. And my concern is just based on my limited experience of being a vendor for the past 6 months here, at DVU, because never before had we been a vendor. And it is a nightmare. We had to hire a person just to work on it, which is ridiculous. And most independent facilitators cannot hire someone to work on their billing.
Mhm.
And so I see it as we are going to lose a whole lot of independent facilitators. And I'm very worried about that.
I think so too, but I think that it's even challenging as it is now. So like, I'm not sure how much, I think it will be a bigger barrier, a more of a challenge to have this vendorship. I've had the opportunity to pursue it and I keep being like, no, thanks, because I don't want to go through that.
Mhm.
It is a barrier, but even the way that it is right now is a barrier. And that's a conversation that we also need to have is like, there's still paperwork that you have to do. You still have to use the e-billing system. A lot of people are still being told they need to have general liability insurance and there's
Even not being a vendor, you're told you would need liability insurance.
Yes. So the barriers that would come with the vendorization, like I'm not sure. The problem is outside of that distinction, in my opinion, like right now. And that's not that it should be. Like I agree with the vision, but the way that it is right now is like it's already a barrier. How many people, and like, okay, I'm going on my soapbox now, but like how many people can afford to enter a profession where they are not going to be paid for their work for at least 6 months?
Yeah.
Who can do that?
Mhm.
And so you're having very specific groups of people, who can do this. I feel very fortunate that I was able to take a risk and do this and not get paid for 6, 8, 10 months when I first started doing this in 2019 or 2018. But like that's the problem that I think we need to fix. To me, like the vendor, not vendor thing is like, that's a smaller distinction at this point in time.
So it's interesting. So in our advocacy, one of the things that we did is we got in the budget this past year because FMSs were saying the same things. And there are FMSs who were leaving certain regional centers because they were getting paid, they were owed hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so one of the things that we could do, we got in a requirement in law that says that FMSs must be paid twice a month. And in exchange for the agreement to have some sort of vendorship, we could say that same requirement goes into effect that you must get paid at least twice a month from your bills. So that let's definitely think about that. I'm seeing so much activity in the chat. I know some of it is just commenting on other things, but Ed, are there any sort of highlights that you want to bring up?
There are several highlights. Would you like me to focus on questions or comments?
Whatever you think is good.
Okay, let me read a few highlights regarding commentary on the questions that you asked, Judy. Yadira says that people are in need of additional coaching support, so individuals and families can freely seek coaching from different supports, maybe not necessarily the ones put forward by the regional center. Not to put words in your mouth, Yadira, but that's my understanding of your comment. Chuck says, my experience has been it's hard to find an IF. Some have told me they have a year-long waiting list right now. The problem is not to get better qualified independent facilitators, but to find any at all. There is no way that independent facilitators should be vendorized. That will make a bad bottleneck worse. Vivian says, yes to Sania's suggestions regarding who'd benefit for enhanced transition supports, along with people of color and people living in group homes. Also consider having each factor qualify the individual for additional funding amounts above the 2,500 base amount. I love that suggestion, Vivian. Hold on one second. And Linda Chan Rapp says another group that could benefit by additional transition supports would be older adults who might not have a vibrant support network to help them navigate the enrollment process. Vivian adds as well people with zero purchase of services, as well as people who have only previously received respite. And Yadira also comments along the lines of what Lourdes says, even when we do speak the same language as clients, trying to help them overcome the language barrier when dealing with the regional center also takes more time. There's a lot to unravel here. Thank you for unpacking that, Yadira.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right, I'm going to go to Christina now.
Hi, Judy. Thank you.
Hi, honey.
Just a couple things I'm just want to brainstorm as everyone's talking. So one thought is there any way that IFs could get paid as service providers under an FMS? My thought is if we were to be able to have, like, if when we're going into self-determination, if we find an IF, we'll talk about IF first. So if we find an IF, if we can get one, is there a way that we can assign them? We choose an FMS, which is a fairly simple to do process. We find an FMS, and then we find an IF, and then the FMS can get paid at least maybe part of the transition fund money, or once they start doing the PCP or whatever it is they're going to do. So they start to get paid by the FMS instead of having to wait and get paid directly by regional center. So that money would go into the budget, but we could access it early before the full budget is approved. So like it's pre-approved funds. And then because there is a big concern, and I've heard this as well too, that there's long waiting lists for independent facilitators, and you had brought up a point too, Judy. So let's say they, or maybe Sunny, so let's say they have that pastor or they have that family friend that they want. I mean, their role really, I think, strongly comes in for person-centered planning, right? And so having that person be able to be paid under an FMS for person-centered planning, and then having an IF come in and do the spending plan, the IPP, the budget, that stuff that family member or friend may not be well versed in. And so you're splitting the funds again a little bit, but having different entities where the expertise is needed, help break up that transition funding. The other thing is as you know, traditional vendors that are already service providers that are vendored with regional center can add in service codes easily. And I don't know if they have the same service code as what IFs are using, and if they have the same training they have to go through. But that's I'm curious about that, because I think it should all be the same across the board, regardless of whether you're a previous vendor or not. And then also the CMS final rule is coming up in, I think, March of 2023. And right now, self-determination PCPs are not required, which I think is a big disservice. And some people are saying they don't think they need to do it, which again, the whole point of self-determination is driven by the person-centered plan. So is there something that we could do that would then, because even people not going into self-determination right now could benefit from a person-centered plan that people going into self-determination are doing. I think it's really important that we start to change the mindset of everybody at regional center and community and providers, that each individual has the right, and we should be talking about their dreams and their goals. And they say that they do this in the IPP, but never once have we been asked what Johnny's has been asked what his dreams or goals are for his life. It's not the well-versed PCP that we do in person in self-determination. So those are my thoughts. And
those are great. Super excellent. I'm going to go back and listen to the recording and capture all that in our letter. And I encourage all of you to reach out to DDS as well and provide your feedback. Connie and Harvey, happy Thanksgiving.
And a
Same
belated,
to
a
you.
belated one to
I
you.
love all those comments. This is
Yeah,
great.
you know, I hate to sound like a broken record, but I will. We've been saying this all along. If the department was giving direction to the 21 regional center with consistency and had authority to enforce it, the job of the facilitator would be tenfold easier. There's no question about it. It's schizophrenic how all 21 regional centers are. And God, never mind. Scratch that. I'm just saying
Getting religious.
it's a broken record, and the pressure should be on their department to make sure the regional centers are obeying what they say. And they've given some direction. There's maybe a light at the end of the tunnel. But
It's a train. It's a train.
Yeah, yeah, it's a train. No. And I'm praying and I'm hoping we keep pressuring them to give that type of direction, and that all 21 regional centers know the rules we have to play by.
I think this is an opportunity to say, all right, we all know about the 21 different ways,
Oh,
but we should say now that it's time. It's time for some consistency. Some of the problems with that is they used to want to have purchase of service standards. So when we said we wanted consistency, they said, well, we want you all to do the same thing. So it isn't the same thing. Self-determination isn't. And I, by the way, I love what you're saying about person-centered planning.
and a person-centered plan 2014, the federal government said anyone getting Medicaid dollars has to have a person-centered plan. So it's out there. It's all been out there for years.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
I get upset. I'm sorry.
You're allowed to. Cindy.
Hi, how are you?
Great.
So a couple of thoughts. First off, part of the language barrier is institutional language. It's about the words and the terminology that regional centers and IFs and everybody else uses that are not part of a person's regular vocabulary. So there's a lot of nodding, oh yes, I understand, when in fact, they may not understand. So I think that that's something that has to be considered, is that there is institutional language that's hard for people to understand. And I think the second thing is we talked a lot about person-centered planning, and person-centered planning is really, really important. But there comes a point when the rubber meets the road, and that's after the person-centered plan. And that's when the certified budget comes in, the spending plan comes in, meeting with regional center, going back and forth, talking about what service codes, the whole shebang. I find it hard to believe that most clients and their families in regional center are able to successfully navigate that in a positive way, because it is getting more and more complicated. It's more complicated in December than it was in September.
Wow.
Right? Because regional centers are starting to go, oh, wait, we need to have this. Oh, wait, we need to have this. And plans are taking 2 months to even get near to where there's a spending plan. And I just feel so badly for these families who have these person-centered plans, and then they're stuck because they don't understand what they're supposed to do next. And you sure as hell know the regional center isn't, most regional centers, most service coordinators are not giving them, now we're going to do this, now we're going to do that. I'm an experienced, seasoned, independent facilitator. And I can't tell you how many times I have to go back to another meeting because now the program manager wants to, and then the client services person wants to look at it. And by the time you get all done, with it and you get an approved spending plan, then you have to actually roll them over to the FMS, which, by the way, we haven't talked about today, but FMSs are not, if I have a plan ready to go today, Judy, it's not going to get funded until January or February because the FMSs are so far behind.
Mhm.
And so I find it sad that, you know, a mom or a dad or a self-advocate say, well, you know, I can do this myself. I just don't know how they can. And maybe I'm being pessimistic, but I just don't see how they can.
Well, Cindy, you're an expert on this for many, many years. And everybody should know Cindy's been working on this through the pilot project from 23 years ago. So I will relay those concerns. Fernando, go ahead. Fernando, I just asked you to unmute.
Yes, I'm trying to. Can
There
hear
you
me?
go. Gotcha.
Okay. The reason that I wanted to comment is because you mentioned that just about everything that the regional center does gets reimbursed. My question simply is, for those of us who eventually may consider doing the appeals, and the appeals is something that directly impacts their budget, not ours. Does that also get reimbursed by the federal government in order to have the regional center just do as many denials as possible so we can get as many appeals as possible?
So one of the things that Fernando asked, Fernando, are you in Peru?
Yes, I am.
Oh, I know I owe you a phone call. I so appreciate you. As soon as I get a moment, I'm definitely calling you. Just in case people couldn't hear Fernando, because he's calling from very far away. I mean, he's on, is that he was talking about the federal reimbursement and whether regional centers are getting reimbursed for the appeals process, federal reimbursement for the appeals process. I don't believe they do, but that's a really excellent question that I'm going to ask. So for the legal fees that regional centers pay to represent them at a fair hearing, is that funding? I believe it is funding from their operations budget. Some parts of their operations budget, though, is federally reimbursable. I'm looking at Will Sanford. No, there are operations funding. There is some, like service coordination is operations funding and it's federally reimbursable. So I sure as hell hope that legal fees are not federally reimbursable. I'm going to you, Will, to try to answer that question because I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, you're correct. I mean, a chunk of the regional center budget is, but things like the legal fees, those are not in any of the waivers. So no, those would not be. But service coordination for anybody who's on the waiver, targeted case management, and some other stuff is all federally funded. Hard part is it goes into the regional center pot. So where the dollar actually got spent could be a challenge. But yes, legal fees are not waiverable in any way, shape, or form.
Well,
sort of like bad back taxes, etc.
Right.
What I'm saying, I'm seeing is it's a way of doing the sebo into the machinery, where not only do you file an appeal, but then once you lose the appeal, file yet another appeal, and then bring it up to the appeals court, the Court of Appeals, I guess, or the
Superior Court.
Superior Court, right? And each and every step along the way, that may actually serve in your favor, not theirs. So it's a way of making sure that whatever services you may be asking for, because let's say you have unmet need and they just flat out don't believe in it because of, again, their policy, whatever that may be, it may be a way of, okay, well, if you're gonna go that way, I'm gonna cost you some couple of $1,000.
Right. Regional centers don't, in my opinion, have not seemed to care about utilizing their monies to hire lawyers to represent themselves, at least in my experience. That's part of the thing that we're trying to change, that in our proposal to change the fair hearing process is that regional centers would not be allowed to hire a lawyer unless the consumer has hired a lawyer, and to make it a more fair process. So I'm not sure, Fernando, about that, but it's interesting.
I just thought maybe people ought to know about that.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Katerina, go ahead. Thanks.
This is more of just a comment. I'm in the process of, I got a proposed budget from the regional center. And I'm not sure how it always parallels, but I also did my IPP. And they sent me my IPP via mail. And then I asked them to send it me, as an email so that I could share it with my independent facilitator, where she caught that there was no mention that I was even going into self-determination. And she specifically put bullet points, gave it to me to send to them. And, had I not had somebody knowledgeable, I might have signed the IPP without knowing that I should have had that included in it.
Yeah.
It's really,
it's a very good warning that people should read the IPP. If in fact you receive the IPP, which I never received my son's IPP. So I always have to ask them, can I see a copy of the IPP, please? Even though they're supposed to send it to you for approval. I don't think I've signed an IPP in a long time either, by the way, because since I don't receive it, it's hard to sign it. You remember, you should all be getting your annual expenses as well, and regardless of whether you're in the self-determination program. Molly Kennedy, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Molly, I accidentally muted you, asking you to unmute.
So I hear people when they talk about like how detailed it gets when you're doing the budget and the spending plan, and that maybe too much money is being put into the person-centered plan. As a self-advocate, I have to say the person-centered plan is really critical to self-advocates. It is our voice. It is the way we show what we're dreaming about, what we want to do in the next year, 3 years, 5 years. It's about who we are and what we want to do and the support we need. And it really drives the whole planning process. So I hear you. You don't want to take forever, and it doesn't want to really take a lot of your budget. But I believe without a strong person-centered plan with very distinct goals, everything else will be difficult. Everything will be more complicated. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. Very helpful. I'm going to go quickly back to the chat. Was there anything that you wanted to raise? There's some people who can't access the chat, and all the people on Facebook can't, and neither can the people watching this on our website on YouTube. So go ahead, Ed.
Yes. So I wanted to hit this question from Susan. So the transition budget could be used to get advocates for IPP meetings, etc. Is there a time limit to use it, or an expiration date for people transitioning to the self-determination program?
There is not a time limit. You can take as much time as you need to transition in. But remember that if, let's say, you do your person-centered plan in June, and you take a couple of years to transition in, that person-centered plan may not be relevant anymore, because your life may change over those 2 years. So you won't have any problems with the regional center, or you shouldn't have any problems with the regional center saying, oh, that person-centered plan is really old, but it's not truly person-centered if you haven't updated it in the last few months before you move in. So that's why I would really, one of the things that very much frustrates me here is just hearing people say over and over again how complicated it is. And these are independent facilitators who are very experienced, who are saying, yeah, man, you need to understand service codes and you need to understand, the budgets and money and that. And that's not the way self-determination was supposed to be. That was never our intention when we got the law passed in 2013. That we needed to have these highly experienced people who are getting paid a lot of money or not that much, but getting paid money to help you move in, and that you can only use people like this. People should be able to do it on their own. That's why we need to break down these barriers and make things less complicated and make them consistent across 21 regional centers. I'm not sure if any of you have seen the latest data on how many people have gone into the self-determination program, but I'm happy to show that to you right now because I think it's pretty distressing. I'll show it to you real quick.
And Judy, while you're pulling that up, I have an anonymous comment that drives directly at that, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
My independent facilitator did my plan in July, but I'm still waiting for a meeting. And my independent facilitator will have to redo my son's person-centered plan because it has changed and we still can't get a date to start. She should get paid double since she'll have to do it twice.
Yeah, so that's certainly an argument that you can make. If your regional center is putting up all these barriers, excellent point. So you'll see here that this is the latest data that was provided by DDS on November 10th. And it is this is official, so I didn't do this, that there's only 922 participants. And remember that in the first 3 years, there was supposed to be 2,500 people, and we're not even at 1,000 yet. And it's open up to the whole state. Somebody needs to be screaming at the top of their lungs, why is this happening? The reason why so few people have gone in is because it is too damn hard and the regional centers are putting up too many barriers and DDS is not breaking down those barriers. I know that we had our ombudsperson, Katie Hornberger, here at the beginning. I think she had to get off. But this is the stuff that is shameful to me, and the legislature needs to hear from all of us on this. I wanted to also show you the data that was provided by ethnicity, because this is interesting as well. That you'll see that obviously whites are going in. This is the transition into the program, right? That whites are overrepresented in the self-determination program, and Hispanics are significantly underrepresented. So you'll see that Asians are about right. African Americans are slightly less, but pretty close to their statewide population. The mysterious other category is pretty even as well. It's that Hispanics make up 40% of consumers statewide, which is, by the way, please note, the highest ethnic group in the state, higher than whites, and yet only they make up 20% of the self-determination participants. So we really, really need to focus on getting more Latinos into the self-determination program. So I wanted to share that. I meant to share that with you earlier and didn't. Go ahead, Christina.
Okay. This is my long-term goal, but I think would honestly solve the problem. And I know there would require different things to be changed, but under the HCBA waiver, which is just like the SDP waiver, under Department of Healthcare Services, they have 9 waiver agencies throughout the state of California. I don't understand why DDS gave SDP waivers to regional centers. I mean, I understand there was nothing else, but what I would suggest is that they either take the people who are working in SDP under regional center and pull them and make something completely separate from regional center that are SDP waiver agencies. And They're not connected to regional center. The providers, like the nursing agencies, there's nursing agencies, but then there's all that provide the nursing services to people under the HCBA waiver, but there's also independent nurse providers that can be independent. They don't need to be contracted. That could be where independent facilitators could be independent, facilitator providers. It's a different way of setting up the whole system, but
she froze.
it might be an easier
Okay.
way to get the federal funding match.
So
to get the federal funding match.
So I want to make sure I'm understanding your suggestion so that we can relate it. Are you able to unmute again now that you muted? Try it. Now.
Yeah.
Oh, you are. Shoot. I just did it. I just muted you accidentally.
Sorry.
Okay. I want to make sure I understand your suggestion, because I'm getting private text from people saying what a great suggestion of Christina's, and I want to make sure I got it. Is that you're saying that service providers would be service providers who are providing the transition services would be part of a different waiver, and they would be statewide vendors? I just want to make sure that that's what you're talking about.
Well, this is how I see it. So under the HCBA waiver, there's these 9 waiver agencies throughout the state of California that oversee anybody transitioning into the HCBA waiver or anybody that's already in the waiver. And under that, they have it's mainly people that have nursing needs, but they have nursing agencies, they have social services, they have a social worker on the case, and but you can be you don't have to be as a nurse. Okay, so then the nurse would work for the nursing agency to provide the nursing care to that participant under the HCBA waiver. Under SDP, but you don't have to work for an agency. You can be an independent provider.
So how would you see it working for the self-determination program?
So how I would see it as there's 9 or however many different SDP waiver agencies. And to be honest, I don't know if it needs to fall under DDS or Department of Healthcare Services, or there's a new Department of Self-Determination, right? Maybe there's a whole different thing, which again, that's a bigger thing, but there would be these waiver agencies that only oversee SDP. And then you have people that are helping with transition services, right? That are contracted. So the nursing agencies are contracted with Medi-Cal, but they work under the HCBA waiver agencies. So there's one, so in SDP, you would have people with transition services, you'd have independent facilitators, you could have service providers who are providing, or FMSs, because service providers are paid. So you'd have FMSs that would be under the umbrella of the SDP waiver agency.
Right. So, but this is just for transition services, nothing else, right?
I would say the whole thing, to be honest. I think there should be a whole waiver agency separate that is, and if it needs to, I understand regional center already has, is overseeing self-determination. So either,
real quick. So you guys should know that we at DVU and at DRC introduced some legislation that literally was laughed at and guffawed by the state council, by many service providers, and certainly by the regional centers when we introduced this, to do almost something like you're saying. We introduced legislation beginning of 2020 where we wanted to create a co-op that we were calling it a cooperative for self-determination that was an alternative to regional centers, and that people could choose to take, they would no longer belong to a regional center. They would be part of a co-op that was member driven, and that had a board of directors directly elected and accountable to them, and that they would only have clients in the self-determination program, and they would streamline the process, that they would have no building, they would have the service coordination would be done in a very special way, like you'd have employment service coordinators and you'd have housing service coordinators, so people who are specialists as opposed to providing individualized services that the independent facilitators would normally provide. We have a whole plan on this, guys, and it went nowhere. I mean, literally, even the people in our community that are advocates, the people who care about the work that we do and are supposed to be there for us, said, this is never going to happen. Why would you even think of this? Bye-bye. And it never went anywhere. So
They have it. I mean, it's
we're always happy to bring back that idea. But I can tell you that it was
the other benefit, Judy, real quick, and this is what triggered it when Harvey and Connie were speaking, is that the cohesiveness. The problem is because there are 21 regional centers and everybody does something different. If there were cohesive agencies, right, that or co-ops, whatever it is, then it would streamline everybody. All the 9 waiver agencies, they all abide by the same things. They all have a rule book. It's like 356 pages of of how they need to run the agency. It's very simple, and that's the problem, is because of the complex. So I love the co-op idea. And you know what? The other thing, and I brought this up to the Department of Healthcare Services, does the SDP waiver have to fall under DDS? Maybe, because they oversee a bunch of different waivers under Department of Healthcare Services. Maybe it's brought under Department of Healthcare Services instead of DDS. It's just a thought.
Yeah, that's great. John Francis, hold on. John?
Okay, I was trying to
There you
unmute.
go.
Am I on? Can you hear me okay?
I sure
just
can.
I'm just going to make a mention, Judy, just because I'm looking at the original letter in regards to the allocation of federal funds that were, that came out, what now? It's been a couple of years now. But North LA alone was allocated $109,000. And I know that these have been designated for recruitment and training, training of SDP, for the principals and logistics, bringing people up to speed in the regional center. Why not? Maybe these funds would be better focused on individually transitioning folks into the program and taking the complicated, the complications off of an IF's plate. I mean, because we're talking about, you said it yourself, it wasn't meant to be that way. IFs are supposed to be stepping in and advocating for folks and finding resources and going out there and helping folks integrate into the community. All these funds could be given to, obviously, I know that your DVU is on board and benefiting and is going to be instrumental in providing coaching and whatnot. But why not use these funds just for that purpose, as opposed to, us, here we are fighting over this $2,500, which is so limiting. And so anyway, that's, you know where I'm going with that.
Yeah.
It could be worked. I think it could be worked a whole lot. We could get a bit smarter about how we use those funds. So,
yeah, I 100% agree. And some people have actually been ripped off by somebody who's inexperienced and ended up not even producing a particularly helpful person-centered plan for them.
Thanks, Judy.
So I want to go back to the chat, which has been amazingly active today, and I'm so happy about it. Is there anything else that you'd like to mention, Ed?
Sure. There's always great stuff in the chat from our folks. One of the things that kind of got lost earlier that I thought was a really great question is from Melody. We spoke about the fact that regional centers are likely to be dictating or laying out a range of salary or an hourly wage for independent facilitators. But Melody asks, what will be a reasonable number of hours to do a person-centered plan, as opposed to what is a reasonable fee?
Yeah, that's a great question. It obviously depends on the individual. I don't think you can say a set number. I would say that a person who has a lot of support, not a significant amount of needs, can probably do a pre-planning meeting in a couple, 2-3 hours, do pre-planning, set up their meeting, have their person-centered planning meeting in maybe 2 hours. And then it might take to write up the notes, maybe 3 to 5 hours for the independent facilitator. So that's not a lot of hours. And I would say that most consumers in the state of California fall into that sort of category. For someone who types to communicate, for someone who is an adult who maybe doesn't have a lot of support and needs a lot of pre-planning. So it's that pre-planning, we've talked about that a lot. The meeting itself is actually not that time consuming. You have to make sure, though, you have the right people in the room at your meeting, that you've thought through a lot of what needs to be talked about at your meeting before you go into it. Because if you don't do good pre-planning, your meeting's going to be a waste of time. And a lot of people spend more time thinking about the food that they're going to have at their meeting than thinking about all of the people that you want to get in there who can help you meet your dreams and goals. So I would say, 10 to 15 hours to do a person-centered plan is a completely reasonable thing. Now, the spending plan is something that actually takes way more time than the person-centered plan, because depending on what you're asking for. So if you need to find staff, if you need to find a place to live so that you can move out, if you need to find the kinds of supports that you want. I mean, there's just so many, or special classes, those things take time. I can tell you that we got through my son's person-centered plan in a week. I presented it to my regional center. We agreed on a budget within a day. That was the easy part. The spending plan took 6 months or 5 months. It was very complicated to figure out what it is how you actually can meet those IPP goals. And so don't underestimate the amount of time to do a spending plan. All right. And we have spent time on the spending plan. We have lots of things in our library on the spending plan. So we encourage you to go back and look at that. All right, we're closing up our session. This has been an amazing, amazing session. I have gotten lots of texts in the background. I've been texting other people about some of the exciting ideas that have come out of this. I want to make sure to capture all of this and to capture the chat and to send those set of recommendations to DDS. For those of you who want to, you should do the same. You should be sending a letter to DDS saying, I know you're considering what you're going to do with enhanced supports, to enhance transition services, or how you may want to vendorize things. Lourdes, I saw your hand go up, but we are really close to 6. So I'm just wrapping up here, if that's okay. Please, if you have something, throw it in the chat real quick, because I'll make sure to capture that. So I want to thank everybody. We will not be here next week. We're still at the every other week. We will see you on December 15th, which will be our final SDP Connect of the year. I wanted to let everybody know rather quickly that we have a job opening at DVU. If anybody is interested or unqualified, we have a position of a program assistant. If you are on our mailing list, please be sure you're on our mailing list. If you are on our mailing list, you should have gotten an email about it today. And I don't know if maybe for a second, Ed, if you can put, there it is. Ed's done. So there is the application for it. We desperately need your help. Ed desperately needs your help because you'll be working a lot with Ed. So yeah, she said you get to work with me, which is a major perk. It is true. She will completely train you. So thank you, everybody. I hope you had a wonderful holiday and that you're preparing for your December solstice or whatever one does in your religion or your point of view. Thank you all and have a great week. Take care all. Bye.